If I woke up tomorrow with nothing, absolutely nothing, no money, no connections, no reputation, just the knowledge I've accumulated over 9 decades of investing and building businesses, what would I do? This is a question I get asked more than almost any other question in my life. People ask me this at shareholder meetings. They ask me at university lectures. They ask me in interviews and in letters they send to my office. And I think people expect me to give some complicated answer involving sophisticated financial strategies or secret techniques that only billionaires know. They expect me to reveal some hidden formula, some insider secret, some magic trick that explains how fortunes are really made. But the truth is far simpler than they expect and far more powerful than they realize. The plan I would follow if I had to start over from zero is the same plan that anyone watching this can follow starting today. It does not require a fortune to begin. It does not require special access or connections or knowing the right people in the right places. It does not require an Ivy League education or a family inheritance or a lucky break. It requires only discipline, patience, and a willingness to do what most people are unwilling to do. Today, I am going to share that plan with you in complete detail, step by step, holding nothing back. And if you follow with discipline and patience, I believe it can change your financial life forever. Let me start by telling you a story about where I actually did start, because contrary to what some people think, I was not born wealthy. My father was a stockbroker during the Great Depression, which is about the worst possible time and profession you could imagine. People had lost faith in Wall Street entirely. The stock market had crashed in 1929 and would not fully recover for over 2 decades. Families had been wiped out. Fortunes had been destroyed. In 1931, when I was just a year old, the bank where my father worked failed. Not just his brokerage, but the entire bank. He lost his job. He had no savings because the bank failure wiped those out too. Everything he had was in that bank, and when it failed, it was all gone. Imagine that for a moment. Your employer goes bankrupt and takes your life savings with it at the same time. My family had almost nothing left. My mother later told me stories about those years, about the fear and uncertainty that hung over everything, about not knowing how they would pay the rent or put food on the table, about the shame my father felt being unable to provide for his family. We were not destitute in the way some families were destitute during the Depression. We did not stand in bread lines or live in Hoovervilles, but we were far from comfortable. My father eventually started his own small brokerage firm, working out of a tiny office the size of a closet, scraping together whatever clients he could find during an era when most people wanted nothing to do with the stock market. Money was tight throughout my entire childhood. I learned the value of a dollar very early in life because dollars were scarce in our household. I started working when I was 6 years old, before I had learned my multiplication tables, before I could write in cursive. I was running a business. I would go door to door in my neighborhood in Omaha selling chewing gum. I bought packs of Wrigley's gum from my grandfather's grocery store at wholesale prices and sold them for a small profit. I learned my first lesson about business from that experience, and it has stuck with me for nearly 90 years. People would ask me to break up the pack and sell them just one stick. Maybe they only wanted one piece. Maybe they only had a few pennies. Maybe they were just being difficult, and I refused. I told them I could not break up the pack. Even at 6 years old, I understood intuitively that my profit margin would disappear if I sold individual sticks. I would be left with 4 sticks that nobody wanted, and I would lose money on the transaction. A pack sold for 25 cents, and I made a nickel profit. If I sold 1 stick for 5 cents, I made 1 cent and was left with unsellable inventory. The economics did not work. That was my introduction to business economics, learned on the doorsteps of houses in Omaha before I even understood what the words profit margin meant. By the time I was 11, I had expanded my enterprises considerably. I was delivering newspapers on multiple routes. I had both the Washington Post and the Times Herald routes in the same neighborhood, which meant I could deliver 2 papers to many of the same houses and make double the money for essentially the same amount of work. I had to wake up before 5 in the morning every single day without exception, not just weekdays, every single day, summer and winter, rain and snow, and sunshine. Christmas morning, I was out delivering papers. 4th of July, I was out delivering papers. I would ride my bicycle through the dark streets of Washington, where my family had moved when my father was elected to Congress, throwing papers onto porches, building up a customer base, and collecting payments at the end of each month. Some customers tried not to pay. Some moved away owing me money. I learned about customer service, and I learned about collecting receivables, and I learned about reliability. I learned about the importance of showing up even when you do not feel like it, even when you are tired, even when it is cold and dark and your bed is warm. I was also selling golf balls that I retrieved from water hazards at the local golf course. I would wade into those ponds in the early morning before the golfers arrived, feeling around with my feet for lost balls in the mud, sometimes getting bitten by turtles or cutting my feet on rocks or broken glass. I would find dozens of balls, clean them up, sort them by brand and condition, and sell them to golfers at a discount from what new balls cost. I was selling Coca-Cola door to door in my neighborhood back in Omaha during the summers, buying 6-packs for a quarter and selling individual bottles for a nickel each, making a 5-cent profit on each pack. I was doing anything I could think of to make money, and I was saving almost everything I earned, while other kids were spending their money on candy and movies and toys, while they were buying comic books and sodas and going to the picture show. I was putting my money away in my dresser drawer. I had a goal that burned inside me. I wanted to be rich, and I understood even then that the path to wealth was through saving and investing, not through spending and consuming. By the time I was 14, I had saved $1,200. That does not sound like much today. You might spend that much on a new phone or a month of rent. But in 1944, $1,200 was a significant sum of money. It was more than many adults earned in an entire year. It was enough to buy a house in some parts of the country. It was enough to buy a brand new car off the showroom floor, and it was enough to buy a 40-acre farm in Nebraska, which is exactly what I did. I bought that farm from a relative who was getting older and wanted to retire. I did not know anything about farming. I had never planted a crop or milked a cow or driven a tractor or baled hay in my entire life. I was a city kid, but I understood the economics of it. The land would produce income year after year, decade after decade. A tenant farmer would do the actual work, the planting and fertilizing and harvesting and maintaining, and he would pay me a portion of the crop value as rent. I would collect passive income while I focused on my studies and my other businesses. The land would just sit there producing value without me having to do anything. I still own that farm today, 80 years later. It has appreciated enormously in value, worth many times what I paid for it, and it has generated income every single year for 8 decades. That $1,200 investment made by a 14-year-old kid who knew nothing about farming is now worth many millions of dollars. Why am I telling you all this history? Because I want you to understand at a deep level that building wealth does not require starting with wealth. It requires starting with the right mindset and the right habits. The mindset is that every dollar matters and every dollar saved is a soldier working for you. The habit is saving and investing consistently over time, regardless of what is happening in your life or in the markets. If I had to start over today with nothing, not a penny to my name, I would follow the exact same principles I followed as a kid. I would work hard at whatever opportunity presented itself. I would save aggressively, far more than most people think is possible. I would invest wisely in productive assets, and I would be patient for decades while compound interest did the heavy lifting. Let me break down exactly what that would look like step by step. The first thing I would do if I had to start over with nothing is get a job. Any job, I know, that sounds obvious, almost too simple to mention. But you would be surprised how many people think there is some shortcut to wealth that does not involve working. They want to find some clever trick, some secret strategy, some way to make money without effort or without doing work they consider beneath them. They want passive income before they have any income at all. There is no such shortcut, at least not at the beginning. You need income before you can do anything else. You need money coming in before you can save, before you can invest, before you can build anything. Money has to come from somewhere, and at the beginning it comes from your labor. So the very first step is to generate income through work. It does not matter if the job is prestigious or impressive. It does not matter if it is your dream job or even remotely close to your dream job. It does not matter if it is what you went to school for or what your parents wanted you to do or what your friends think is cool. What matters is that you are earning money. When I was young, I did not turn down opportunities because they were beneath me. I sold chewing gum door to door at 6 years old. I delivered newspapers in the freezing cold at 5 in the morning. I picked up lost golf balls from muddy ponds. I worked in my grandfather's grocery store. I cleaned up a filling station. I did whatever it took to generate income. The work was not glamorous. Nobody was impressed. But money came in, and I saved it. If I were starting over today with nothing, I would do exactly the same thing. I would take whatever job I could get immediately while looking for better opportunities. Maybe that means working at a restaurant washing dishes or bussing tables. Maybe it means working at a retail store stocking shelves in the middle of the night. Maybe it means driving for a delivery service, bringing packages or food to people who do not want to leave their homes. Maybe it means doing manual labor at a construction site, hauling materials and cleaning up debris. Maybe it means mowing lawns or cleaning houses or walking dogs. The specific job matters far less than the fact that you are generating income. You cannot build wealth without income. You cannot save money you do not have. You cannot invest money you have not earned. Step one is to earn money through work. There is also something else that happens when you work hard at any job, even a job that seems menial or unimportant or beneath your abilities. You develop work ethic, you develop reliability, you develop the habit of showing up and doing what needs to be done regardless of how you feel that day. Regardless of whether you slept well, regardless of whether you are in the mood, you learn to push through when you are tired, when you are frustrated, when you would rather be anywhere else doing anything else. These habits are invaluable. They will serve you throughout your entire career, no matter what you end up doing. I have seen people with brilliant minds and wonderful educations from the finest schools who never amounted to anything financially because they never developed basic work ethic. They thought they were too smart for entry level work. They thought certain jobs were beneath them. They waited for the perfect opportunity that matched their credentials instead of taking any opportunity and proving themselves. And they wasted years accomplishing nothing. I have also seen people with average abilities and modest educations achieve extraordinary success because they worked harder and more consistently than everyone around them. They showed up early, they stayed late, they did what others were unwilling to do. They did not complain, they did not make excuses, they just worked. The habit of hard work is worth more than any degree from any university. Now, here is where most people go wrong. This is where the path to wealth diverges from the path to perpetual financial struggle. They get a job, they start earning money, and then they spend it all or worse. They spend more than they earn by taking on debt. They finance a car they cannot afford because they think they deserve a nice car after working so hard. They run up credit card balances buying things they do not need to impress people they do not even like. They get a nicer apartment than they need because they want to feel successful, because they want to feel like they have made it. They buy clothes and gadgets and experiences to signal status to other people or to make themselves feel better. This is the trap that keeps most people poor their entire lives. They earn money and they spend money in roughly equal amounts, or they spend even more than they earn through debt. And they never get ahead. They are running on a treadmill, working hard, but going nowhere financially. Year after year passes, and they have nothing to show for their labor, except a pile of stuff that is depreciating and maybe a pile of debt that is growing. They work 40 years and retire with almost nothing. The second step in my plan, and this is absolutely critical, is to spend far less than you earn and save the difference. This sounds simple. Almost too simple to be worth mentioning. Every financial advice book says this. Every personal finance guru preaches this. but it is the foundation of all wealth building, and almost nobody actually does it. You cannot invest money you do not have. You cannot build wealth if you are consuming everything you produce. You must create a gap between what you earn and what you spend. And that gap becomes your investment capital. The wider the gap, the faster you build wealth. The narrower the gap, the longer everything takes, or the more likely you are to never build wealth at all. Most people's gap is zero or negative. They spend everything they earn or more. They are not building anything. When I was young, I saved the vast majority of what I earned. I did not spend money on things I did not need. I did not try to impress anyone with possessions. I did not care what other people thought about what I wore or what I owned or what I drove. I lived well below my means even when my means started to grow, and I invested the difference. This is exactly what I would do if I were starting over today. I would find the cheapest acceptable housing. I would share an apartment with roommates if necessary to cut costs in half or even more. I would drive a reliable used car, not a new one that depreciates 20% the moment. You drive it off the lot. A new car is one of the worst financial decisions most people make. I would cook my own meals instead of eating out. Restaurant food costs 3 or 4 times what home cooked food costs, and it is often less healthy. I would eliminate every unnecessary subscription and expense. No premium streaming services, no expensive gym memberships, no fancy coffee every morning. I would live like I was still poor even after I started earning decent money, because the goal is not to look successful. The goal is to become successful, and you become successful by accumulating capital, not by spending it on things that impress other people. Let me tell you something about the appearance of wealth versus actual wealth. This is one of the most misunderstood concepts in personal finance and one of the biggest reasons people stay poor. There are people who earn $200,000 per year and have nothing, zero net worth, maybe negative net worth. They have a nice house in a nice neighborhood with a big mortgage payment every month. They have expensive cars with big loan payments sitting in the driveway. They have fancy clothes in their closets and expensive vacations on their Instagram, and they look wealthy to everyone who sees them. People envy them. People think they have it made, and they have a net worth of essentially zero or even negative because everything they have is financed with debt. They owe money on all of it. One job loss away from financial catastrophe. There are people who earn $50,000 per year and have $500,000 saved. They live in a modest house that they own free and clear or that has a small mortgage. They drive a 10-year old car that runs perfectly well because they maintain it. They do not take fancy vacations or buy expensive clothes. They shop at discount stores and bring their lunch to work and find free entertainment. They look middle class or even working class. Nobody envies them. Nobody thinks they are successful, but they have real wealth. Actual money that belongs to them, capital that is working for them around the clock, money that is compounding and growing while they sleep. Which person is actually wealthier? The person earning $200,000 with nothing saved, living paycheck to paycheck on a high income, one job loss away from disaster, or the person earning $50,000 with $500,000 in investments with money working for them 24 hours a day? The answer is obvious when you think about it clearly. The second person could quit their job tomorrow and live off their investments for years. The first person could not miss a single paycheck without serious financial stress. Real wealth is not what you earn. Real wealth is not what you spend. Real wealth is not what you show the world. Real wealth is what you keep and what you grow. And the way you keep and grow wealth is by spending far less than you earn, consistently, year after year, decade after decade. The third step in my plan is to invest the savings in productive assets. This is where your money starts working for you instead of you constantly working for money. And this is where most people get confused or intimidated or paralyzed by too many choices. They think investing is complicated. They think you need to be an expert with specialized knowledge. They think you need to watch the stock market every day and make clever trades based on secret information. They think you need insider knowledge or sophisticated strategies that only professionals understand. None of that is true. If I were starting over today with nothing, here is exactly how I would invest every dollar I saved. I would put my savings into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. That is it. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. No clever strategies or sophisticated analysis. Just a simple index fund that owns the 500 largest companies in America. I would set up automatic investments so that every month a portion of my paycheck goes directly into this fund without me having to think about it or make any decisions. The money would come out of my bank account automatically before I even saw it, before I could be tempted to spend it on something else. The fourth step in my plan is to continuously increase your income over time. While frugality and investing will build wealth slowly but surely, increasing your income accelerates everything dramatically. The more money you earn, the more you can save even while maintaining a comfortable lifestyle. The more you can save, the faster your investments compound. I would never be content with a single source of income at a single level forever. I would always be looking for ways to earn more, whether through advancing in my career, learning new skills that command higher wages, starting a side business on nights and weekends, or any other method available. The specific approach matters less than the mindset of continuous improvement. The fifth step in my plan is perhaps the most important and the one that most people fail to follow. Be patient. Building wealth takes time, serious time, decades of time. There are no shortcuts that actually work. There are no get-rich-quick schemes that produce lasting results. The power of compound interest requires years and decades to work its magic. In the early years, the gains seem modest. You save $10,000 and earn $1,000. That is nice, but not life-changing. But after 20 or 30 or 40 years, the compounding becomes extraordinary. Your portfolio is generating returns that dwarf your original contributions, but you only get there if you stay the course. If you stay invested through every downturn, if you resist every temptation to chase hot stocks or time the market or give up when progress seems slow. The sixth step is to avoid the landmines that destroy wealth. High interest debt will destroy your finances faster than almost anything else. Get rich. Quick schemes will separate you from your money. Lifestyle inflation will consume every raise you ever receive. Putting all your eggs in one basket will wipe you out when that basket falls. Making emotional decisions during market panics will lock in losses at the worst possible time. Part of building wealth is avoiding the catastrophic mistakes that destroy wealth. Let me give you some specific numbers so you can see exactly how this works over time. These numbers are based on historical stock market returns, which have averaged about 10% per year over the past century. If you start with nothing and save just $500 per month, which is about $125 per week, here's what happens after year one. You have about $6,300, not much. After year 5, you have about $39,000. Still modest. After year 10, you have about $102,000. Now we are getting somewhere. You have crossed the six-figure threshold. After year 20, you have about $379,000. After year 30, you have about $1.1 million. You are a millionaire. From saving $500 per month and investing it consistently. Now let us say you are more aggressive. You find a way to save $1,000 per month. Maybe you have a higher income. Maybe you have an extremely frugal lifestyle. Maybe you have a side hustle that generates extra cash. At $1,000 per month, after 30 years, you have about $2.3 million. And if you can save $1,500 per month, after 30 years, you have about $3.4 million. These are life-changing amounts of money, generational wealth built from consistent saving and investing over time. But here's the part that most people miss. Most of that wealth accumulates in the later years. The first decade of investing does not look very impressive. You are putting in money month after month, and it does not seem like much is happening. The balance is growing, but not dramatically. Most people get discouraged during this phase. They wonder if it is worth the sacrifice. They see their friends buying nice things and going on nice vacations, and they question whether saving and investing is really the right choice. But if they can push through that first decade, the second decade is when things start to get interesting, and the third decade is when the wealth explosion happens. The last 10 years of a 30-year investing period typically generate more wealth than the first 20 years combined. That is the power of compound interest. It is slow at first, and then it becomes unstoppable. I have watched this pattern play out countless times over my 9 decades. I have seen people who started with nothing build fortunes through patient, consistent investing, and I have seen people who earned enormous salaries end up with nothing because they could not control their spending. The difference was never talent or intelligence or luck. The difference was always behavior. The people who built wealth had the discipline to save consistently and the patience to let compound interest work for decades. The people who ended up with nothing lacked one or both of those qualities. Let me share one more story that illustrates why patience matters so much. My old partner, Charlie Munger, who passed away recently at 99 years old, was not a billionaire until he was well into his 60s. Think about that. One of the most successful investors in history did not accumulate the bulk of his wealth until his 60s. If he had given up at 50, if he had concluded that his approach was not working, he would have missed out on 95% of his eventual fortune. The same is true for me. The vast majority of my wealth was accumulated after my 50th birthday, not because my returns were better in my later years. My returns have been fairly consistent throughout my career, but because compound interest needs time to work. The money I invested in my 20s has been compounding for 70 years. The money I invested in my 30s has been compounding for 60 years, all of that time, working in my favor year after year, decade after decade. This is why starting early matters so much. Every year you delay costs you more than you can imagine. If you start investing at 25 instead of 35, you end up with dramatically more money at retirement, even if you invest the exact same amount. Those extra 10 years of compounding make an enormous difference. Time is the most valuable asset in investing, and it is the one thing you cannot get back once it is gone. Now I want to address something that might be on your mind. You might be thinking, Warren, this sounds great for young people who have decades ahead of them, but what if I am older? What if I am 50 or 55 or 60 and just getting started? Is it too late for me? The answer is that it is never too late to improve your financial situation. The principles are exactly the same regardless of your age. Spend less than you earn, invest the difference. Be patient, the timeline might be shorter. So you might not accumulate as much as someone who starts at 25, but even 10 or 15 years of disciplined saving and investing can dramatically improve your financial security. You might not become a multimillionaire, but you might accumulate enough to supplement your Social Security, to have a cushion for emergencies, to leave something for your children or grandchildren, to have options and freedom you would not otherwise have. And even if you are at an age where you cannot accumulate vast wealth for yourself, you can teach these principles to your children and grandchildren. You can give them the knowledge and habits that will change their financial lives. That is a legacy worth leaving. Knowledge that passes from generation to generation, that helps your descendants avoid the financial struggles you may have experienced. This plan is not complicated. It is simple, almost embarrassingly simple, but simple is not the same as easy. Executing this plan requires discipline that most people do not have. It requires patience that most people cannot sustain. It requires saying no to things you want today so you can have freedom tomorrow. It requires ignoring what everyone else is doing and staying focused on your own long-term goals. Most people will not do this. They will look for shortcuts that do not exist. They will get impatient when progress seems slow. They will make emotional decisions that sabotage their progress. They will give up when the going gets tough. But if you can do this, if you can commit to this plan and stick with it through everything for decades, through market crashes and recessions and personal setbacks, you will build wealth. The principles are timeless. They worked in 1942 when I bought my first stock. They work today, and they will work for as long as there's a stock market and an economy. The math is certain. The only variable is you and whether you have the discipline and patience to execute. Start today. Start with whatever you have, even if that is nothing, because nothing is exactly where I would start if I had to do it all over again, and I know exactly where I would end up, right back where I am now. Because the principles that built my fortune are available to anyone willing to follow them with discipline and patience. Now go build yours.